Rolling 42.1. All right, so I've been here since, it's 11 at night now. I've been here since 11 in the morning. Lance hired me to pose for his art class in the morning, and then after that was over, we've been working, Lance has been working ever since, redoing this. Look at this head. He's been working on the head. The head is much more lively. It looks much more like me. It's a good head, Lance.
I appreciate that, my esteemed colleague Rick. So what happened was, Rick was not satisfied with the head last week, and I was never 100% on it myself, but I couldn't really figure out what to, why I didn't like it, and I didn't want to put a second layer of paint on it. I didn't want to put a veil on it. But Rick, when he said he wasn't satisfied, I just thought...
Well, I thought the face looked more dead than the body. The body has all these rounded, kind of rosy, kind of glowy forms, and the face looked kind of mask-like. And,
yeah.
And then I got all, not pissy, but I was like, yeah, come on. Nudgy about it.
So he pressured me to... his dissatisfaction sort of got my pride up, and I said, to hell with it, I'm gonna go over it again. When you go over something again that's 90% correct, you're kind of sacrificing everything to get that extra 10%. And so it's a little risky and very unpleasant, but I did it, and now I'm happy I did it, because the first rule is, if you think you can raise it 10%, you have to try. And so what I did was I widened the bridge of his nose, and I shaded back the side of his nose and the side of his... I shaded back the side of his nose, and I shaded back the side of the cheek more, so he's more dimensional. I added more light to this side of the lip, which made it lighter. And then I brightened some of the highlights so his skin looks glossier. And so that makes him look alive. Oh, and I found out that Rick has a Leonard Nimoy-esque frowny slant to his eyebrows. And by adding that, I gave him a little bit more character.
He even had me take out my contact lenses, because it turns out the lenses affect the shape of how the eyelid lays across my eyeball.
Yeah, it turns out that what happens is the lenses push his flap of skin out, and that casts a shadow on the inside of his eyes. So you would lose these spangly little highlights and white areas. So we had him take his lenses out, and this fold of flesh flattened against his eyeball, and that exposed more light. So it was just out of desperation, and it turned out that was what was causing it. So I was able to keep the spangly highlights.
He means the listening tear ducts, the tear ducts.
Well, if you want to get technical, yes. And that makes his eyes look more lively, because with the lenses in, the whole globe of the eye goes into shadow, which looks a little dumb. All right, now shall we begin the gladiatorial combat?
All right, yeah, you want to.
All right, let's get started.
All right, off comes the frickin' shirt. It's frickin' cold. It's like stupid LA is unseasonally. Anyway.
If you look carefully on a high-def image, you can see his nipples are more erect than usual.
For anybody who likes old guy nipples.
Who doesn't? All right, so let's get started. I myself, while he stands there suffering, am going to work on his hand, which means I get to sit down.
Okay. All right, so maybe the first thing is, you have a vision for America. I have a vision for America. I'm not sure either vision matters, because, everything's going to get replaced in the future. It's like, you know, a brontosaurus that ate plants would be the liberal, and the T-Rex that ate brontosauruses would be the conservative. But fighting about, you know, which view of dinosaur life is more important for the future of dinosaurdom. But it turns out it didn't at all, because they went away.
No, that's wrong, Rick. What happens is, they say that great civilizations are not destroyed by enemies. They commit suicide. And I always thought that was an overly dramatic and kind of silly statement until the Obama administration, when I realized that under the right circumstances, a president can destroy a country. And I believe that if Hillary Clinton had won, another 8 years of liberal leadership would have destroyed America.
Yeah, but what about when AI and the whole just rejiggering of the world just realigns everything, and that unaugmented humans aren't even in charge anymore 100 years from now?
Well,
also, what about the thesis that what takes down empires is too much military spending?
too much military spending has never taken down a capitalist democracy. It took down the Soviet Union.
What about the Roman Empire?
The Roman Empire was defeated because their society forgot how to be Romans. They were defeated by a relatively small and not particularly dangerous enemy in the Huns. They'd faced much greater enemies in the past, but the Romans had become decadent.
Weren't they also overextended? Wasn't there?
No, they weren't overextended. Their empire reached its greatest height under Emperor Trajan a few hundred years before Attila, I believe, and they had actually sort of retracted a little bit. And what happened was the Romans had populated their military with people that weren't Roman. They had taken in people from other parts of the empire. The aristocracy was no longer participating in the defense of the country. The troops were not as, I don't believe they were as well trained, although I could be wrong about that, but they weren't Roman citizens anymore.
Well, you said the Romans became decadent. Don't we right now have one of the most decadent presidents in history?
The Romans were never defeated by excessive sexuality, excessive drink. They knew how to party. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that they didn't have the same class of people that saw with clarity that they needed to grab their sword and go and fight to the death if necessary. It turns out that there was a lot of disease, a lot of mental illness in the city of Rome caused by the lead pipes, and also caused by a lack of patriotism. Like there were too many people that were not invested in the success of the country, too many people that were in the beginnings of the Republic and the Empire. The aristocrats considered it an honor to participate in leadership of the army, and they had been getting out of that, and they weren't. Can I
hold on for one? Like, I think where you're going is that you'd want to say that liberals don't care about America. I think you'll say that at some point, but when I look on Twitter, and I live my frickin' life on Twitter, I see a lot of people on both sides who care deeply enough about America to be really pissy about it and to be fighting about it all the time on social media. So is it not patriotic to be fighting about visions of America?
In my opinion, what the Democrats, what the average liberal is upset about is not that America is going badly, or it's that their vision of turning America into a socialist utopia may not be carried out. That what the average liberal wants is not a return to the past that they see as evil. In other words, the average liberal thinks that that the America of the past was the bad old days, and that the best thing we can do is change America into something new and better. And so the liberals are upset about that. They're not upset about losing America. They're upset that they can't improve America because America is a sinful, evil place that needs to be changed and corrected. The average Republican, conservative, sees America as the great shining city on a hill and wants American values to be preserved. That's why this is not an inconsequential discussion that will somehow be changed by AI and new technology. We're talking about losing the foundations of American civilization. The ideas of capitalism, independence, courage, duty, all those things are what I'm afraid we're going to lose, as well as the basic rights in the Constitution.
This week was CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, whatever the deal is, whatever those, where you've had a lot of like the most conservative or the most far right of conservatives having their convention.
My people.
Yeah, but
my
like,
homies.
Isn't there something to be said for everybody who isn't CPAC? The conservatives who aren't that conservative and everybody else?
Well, the conservatives that aren't that conservative are preparing to make 11 million illegal aliens American citizens who will then vote Democrat for the rest of time and destroy what's left of the U.S.
Well, no, you're overstating.
And turn us into a socialist paradise.
Nobody that I've heard is saying take every illegal alien and give them amnesty.
I've heard that's what Nancy Pelosi wants. She was calling Trump a racist because he wanted to build a wall and end chain migration. She called him a white supremacist because of that.
Yeah, but that's not the same. She may have. Okay, she did that, but
her view is the general Democrat view, and unfortunately, a lot of Republicans like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan seem to be bought off as well by the growers and by people that want to bring in more illegals.
Well, that's not going to happen.
What do you mean it's not going to happen?
11 million illegal aliens are not going to. There aren't enough people in the House and Senate to vote for that to give 11 million illegal aliens amnesty.
Well, that's because there is a hardcore wing of Republican conservatives that are holding out. But I assure you that if Ted Cruz and who's the guy that got beat up, Dr.
Ryan.
Yeah,
no, Rand Paul.
Yeah, Rand Paul and Mike Lee. If those guys weren't there, there would be no border. Even Trump appears to be letting me down. Words I never thought I would say on the immigration issue.
Okay,
so they're holding the line to prevent America from becoming a socialist country.
All right. There's nothing I want to fight about here, so let's move on to something to fight about, which is yesterday, the Democratic memo, the rebuttal to the Republican memo about the FISA warrant on Carter Page came out. And it makes... Carter Page is the guy who worked on the Trump campaign who was under surveillance by the FBI for contact with Russia. And the Republicans said it was a politically motivated hit job on Page based on this dossier that was paid for by the Democrats. And then the Democratic rebuttal to that memo says it wasn't just the dossier, that they were investigating him long before the dossier came out, that the surveillance wasn't of the Trump campaign, that it was of Carter Page himself, that it rebutted rebutted all this stuff, that the 4 FISA judges were all appointed by Republican presidents, and that they knew of the potential political bias in the people who'd commissioned the dossier. All I can tell you is, the best thing I can tell you is to read both memos and whatever else you can find. The Republican memo is less than 3.5 pages, and the Democratic memo, not counting the footnotes, is about 7 pages. It doesn't take that long to read, and just draw your own conclusions.
Well, my response is, as usual, the Democrats are lying. Truth doesn't matter to Democrats. They want power. So, first of all, the fact that there are Republicans, that the judges were Republican appointees, is completely and utterly irrelevant. You can fool a Republican appointee.
Well, they didn't just fall out of bed or fall off the turnip truck or whatever.
Yeah, they're judges, and they get this apparently routine notification from the FBI that they want to have a surveillance on someone, and it's 90% rubber stamp with the FISA court.
Well, an application for a FISA warrant is 60 pages long.
Right, but they approve 90% of it. Now, are you going to interrupt me, or do I get to make my points?
No, you get to go ahead.
All right, so the fact that the people are Republican appointees is another Democrat dodge. They are so good at diverting. Anybody the fact that someone's a Republican does not mean that they weren't fooled by the FBI when they took out this application. So it's just a dodge. It's just another look there, see, they're Republican appointees, you don't have to worry. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's irrelevant. Second, the application for the warrant was not the first warrant mentioned that there were 4. They attempted to get the warrant 4 times, to get the approval 4 times. And the first time they did it, the only thing they had in it was the dossier. So this ridiculous dossier is still the explanation for the first one. Now, the other 3 had mentioned other things, but they started the ball rolling with this disgraceful dossier. The second point is that where did I write this down? The second point was that the dossier was never vetted by anybody but this one British spy who got his information from Russian intelligence and from one of Hillary Clinton's henchmen. That's where he got his information from, and it's up when you're going to investigate the opposing candidate's campaign aid. You said you'd let me talk.
You're right. You're all right.
It's incumbent upon you to have more than one person verify, where did you get this information, Mr. Steele? Well, how do you know this to be true? Which they didn't do. And the Democrat memo does not deny that. My third point is that is that the mention, when they did apply for the permission to do this, they put a small footnote that could easily have been ignored, saying that there might be some attempt to use this information might have been used in order to damage the Trump campaign. However, nowhere in their application did they mention what they knew full well, that the dossier was written by the Clinton campaign. And if they had said, look, we've got this dossier, it was written by a Clinton henchman and Russian intelligence, which is what they should have done, no judge in his right mind would have approved it. So none of that is beaten back by the Democrat memo. So the Republicans are still right to be hopping mad about the Democrat corruption.
All right, so now I get to, I'm going to say again, read both memos. It's a total of not much more than 10 pages. I'll say quickly, and then we'll move on to other stuff. Carter Page was under FBI surveillance since the FISA warrant was to start looking at him in September of 2016. But he'd been under FBI surveillance and had even been interviewed by the FBI. He'd been under surveillance since 2013 and interviewed by the FBI in June 2016. So he was already on the FBI's radar.
By the way, has anybody noticed that Carter Page is still walks among us? Well, in spite of this dragnet of Democrat henchmen trying to get him, apparently he really must not have done anything that bad, because he's still fine walking around. They didn't get him for anything. So again,
unlike Manafort, who got hit with.
Fine, but we're not talking about Manafort
you're right,
right
you're
now.
right,
We're staying on point.
Okay, all right.
Carter Page is still a patriotic American, apparently. So one more reason to believe that it was just an excuse to surveil the Trump campaign.
Except, at least according to the Democratic memo, the Trump campaign was not surveilled. Carter Page was surveilled.
Aha. Now, you fail to understand how the surveillance creeps. What happens is this: when you're surveilling,
I know you got a circle of
when you I need to explain it to our millions of followers. When you surveil one person, if they mention the name of anybody else, you're allowed to surveil that person too. So if the Democrats had gotten a hold of anybody in the Trump campaign that said anything a little bit funny about anybody in the Trump campaign, they could have worked their way up to Trump and surveilled him. That's why you don't want them surveilling anybody, because according to the rules, they can creep over to people that may be mentioned by the subject. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Trump was apparently notified, had a lengthy meeting with the head of the NSA, and then announced to the public that he was being surveilled, and they had to leave Trump Tower and go somewhere else. And people were asking, how come we're not having this big pilgrimage to the Trump Tower? And I don't remember precisely what the order of events was, but I do know that after the meeting with the head of the NSA, within 24 hours, the Trump campaign and transition team had to move somewhere else. And when they finally weaseled it out of Trump, he said it's because we were being surveilled in the Trump Tower. And people believe it was because of the meeting with the NSA, who has remained loyal to the American Constitution, as opposed to Obama, the FBI, and the Justice Department.
Okay, read both memos. I want to move on to something else that we don't necessarily have to fight about. You told me that you'd received some feedback about this production where somebody was curious and maybe a little annoyed as to why me, a guy who's been married for almost 27 years, constantly talks about how I couldn't get a girlfriend in high school. And why is that pertinent, 40 years later? And let me explain why. So, when I was 17, 40 years ago, I started writing a book about a guy who I was bummed because I couldn't get a girlfriend. And this was a big deal back then. And I think this is something, it's going to be it's kind of a historical curiosity now, which I'll explain in a couple minutes. But for me, not being able to get a girlfriend was a big deal, to the point where I kind of freaked out and I decided not to go to college after I graduated. I decided to go from living with my mom and stepdad to my dad and stepmom in a different city and go back to high school using fake transcripts that said I hadn't yet graduated, to see if I could. I swore I wasn't going to leave high school until I got a girlfriend. But first, before I did that, I decided I was going to write a book, a novel about somebody who did that. And that was going to be my Harvard application essay, this novel that I'd started, or was trying to start. Because I was trying to write a Harvard admissions essay, and I realized I had nothing exceptional to tell them about myself, which was part of the freak out, or part of the cause of the freak out. So I started plotting this novel, and then I got really bummed, and just kind of, as the freak out continued, I'm like, all right, it won't be a novel, I'll make it into a true story, and I really will go back to high school. And I really did. I broke into my high school, and I stole a bunch of blank transcript stuff, and I made fake transcripts, and I went back to high school. And for 40 years, since I was 17, I've been trying to sell this book. And back in 2014, for about 4 days, I had a book deal with Riverhead Press. They said, we want to make a deal, but then they called back and the editor said she couldn't get the publishers to go along with her on the deal, so the deal went away. But I've got this book that I've been working on for 40 years about this frustrated high school kid. Plus, more than 36 years ago, I started coming up with a theory of the universe, about how the universe is information-based and isn't purely a Big Bang universe. The Big Bang didn't happen as one Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. And I'm going to smuggle the theory of the universe into the book about the kid that goes back to high school. It's like a Trojan horse for that. But to get a book deal now, it helps if you have a social media presence. So this entire production is designed to help me get more of a social media presence, to help Lance get more of a presence, and to help me get a book deal by being able to claim in the book pitch, I've got this many subscribers, I'm on YouTube, I'm on this new thing called Hear Me Out, which is like Twitter that you can listen to. I've got a bunch of followers on Twitter and all this stuff. So it's all part of this plot to sell this thing I've been working on for 40 years that happens to concern a kid who's frustrated that he can't lose his virginity, which is kind of a historical curio or curiosity, in that we're 6 months into the Me Too thing, a re-examination of male entitlement and sexual harassment, which it's kind of an entitled thing to think that this should be. I mean, trying to lose your virginity stories were huge in the 70s and 80s. But it's kind of an entitled thing that we're going to make a whole movie about some poor, sad little boy who can't get a girl to give it up, and his quest and how he finally does. It's a very male and not quite rapey, but certainly very entitled kind of thing. And the world has changed. And so I still think my book is saleable. It's still an interesting story, but it's not the story. Part of the story now is, yeah, this is a look at how things were 40 years ago when, you know, in a more entitled time. So that's my deal. Lance, you got anything?
No, I just wanted to say that since you mentioned me, I'm not doing this to get exposure, because frankly, I don't know what exposure would help. I mean, I'm an oil painter, and if exposure would help that, then I would do it for that reason. But I don't think it matters for a painter, because people just don't buy oil paintings anymore. You know, whether you're exposed on YouTube or not. So that's kind of out of the picture for me. I am doing it because he's a damn good model. Regardless of whether he was able to get laid in high school, I feel like Rick is a hell of a model. I'm really getting a good painting. I get to keep this painting. So he's giving me thousands of dollars worth of free modeling.
Well, hold on. You say you get to keep the painting, but the painting, if it turns out to be a masterpiece, kind of belongs to the world.
Well, look, let me put it this way. I like to say I've got the finest art collection in the ghetto, because when I do a painting, I get to keep it. And the reason I get to keep it is because nobody buys them. But if anyone was to meet my price, then yeah, then they'd get to keep it. So that's kind of how it works. People have to pay me enough to let go of something that I'm very attached to.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the Louvre owns the Mona Lisa, but really the Mona Lisa is in, you know, billions of people's awareness around the world.
One of the things you have to sort of live with in the back of your mind when you're an artist, when you're a painter, is that all of your paintings might end up in the bottom of somebody's closet, in a walk-in closet. Somebody may, they may be hanging behind an umbrella and an overcoat, and only be discovered when that person dies or is put in an old folks home. And then people will say, what the hell is this? A nude guy holding a staff. Fuck this shit. Do you want it? No, I don't want it. And maybe we can get something for it. Yeah, maybe someone will give us $50 for this. Okay. So you kind of have to live with that possibility. Now, the way you live with it is you just don't think about it. You think, no, that won't happen to me. But it could.
Okay. That's a good time to break, right?
Yep.